Whenever you're watching a show, it's easy not to realize how many shots are carefully framed. Tools are used very deliberately. Take, for example, contrast, which helps guide audiences' eyes using bokeh, color, and lighting, drawing attention to specific intended places. There's obvious thought placed into who or what is in the foreground, and similar attention is even given to the details in the background, the things that shouldn't be noticed. But this extends beyond our eyes. Stories do the exact same thing with audiences' attention, treating engagement like a limited resource, and carefully guiding viewers towards the important things in a story. Because rare things are worse than an audience being confused when they're not supposed to be. So what happens when a story is told in the background? Information is presented behind the things intended to draw the audience's attention. And what if that's why a beloved side character is able to exist so expertly with limited resources? Welcome to this week's video. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about all the fantastic things that can happen in the background. Something I've talked about multiple times on this channel is how I love a world, characters, and story that exist beyond what the audience is allowed to see. And while I do think that's awesome, I do have to acknowledge the fact that stories have priorities, because often stories focus on what's most important, creating a piece of media that serves its primary purpose, being engaging and satisfying. I think the original Star Wars trilogy is a great example of this. It was made with intention and succeeded. It's absolutely through and through a space opera. It feels like a grand stage play. It's a story where everything hangs on the balance of an epic battle between good and evil. But for all its greatness and innovation, I don't think it makes the universe feel as big as it could. And I think this is clearly demonstrated when Andor came along and engaged with a significantly narrowed plot, one that makes small worlds feel rich with culture, which in turn implies significant depth for the rest of the expansive universe. By narrowing its focus and going deeper instead of wider, it hints at so much more. Now, while I prefer Andor's style to the original trilogy, I don't think they're meant to be compared. I think both stories set out and succeeded in telling the story they wanted to. So when I praise a story's ability to create a world that feels bigger than what we're actually allowed to see, I don't assume all stories should aim for that specific goal. It's ultimately extra, only capable of being engaged in when a show has first already succeeded in its initial priorities. Now that being said, I do adore media that creates room for extra depth, subtly inserting things to be stumbled upon in an initial or repeat viewing, little Easter eggs that aren't necessary for someone to enjoy the story, but also enhance it dramatically when noticed. And one of my favorite examples of that, and the focus of today's video, is all centered around Frieren beyond Journey's End. One of Frieren's many beloved characters is the third of the primary trio, Stark, the terrified but incredibly heroic warrior. Now, the primary focus of Frieren's story is following the namesake of the show, Frieren, an everlasting elf that's recontextualizing her previous journey with a new one, answering the question of what might happen after the hero's journey. The whole point is that she engages in this new adventure in a way that reveals to her information and interpretation of her past experiences. And while Frieren is absolutely a fantastic point of view protagonist, I think the side characters are what make this story feel vast. Stark is a clear standout in a show filled with great characters. One of the reasons why I think he's so exceptionally well written is because of how positively he influences the story with such a limited amount of resources. Of the primary trio, he's given the least attention and screen time. He's introduced last and even excluded from a big portion of a major arc in the first season. But despite that, he still feels just as much a core component of the story as his surrounding cast members. One thing that makes this character so great is all the little moments the writing gives him. Things like whenever Stark leaves a city or town, the impact he's had on the people living there is prevalent. Townsfolk showcase their gratitude, and kids cry as they say their farewells. It's a consistent detail placed repeatedly throughout the story, and is only occasionally the focus of the scene it's in. Like I said earlier, sometimes Frieren literally places something in the background, but more often they sneak details around the focus of any given scene. So there's this filmmaking term called focal points. Where in a given shot are people supposed to be looking? In cinematography, many tools are used to influence an audience's attention. Important things are often placed in the foreground and highlighted using bokeh and contrast, separating it from its background. Lighting and color are used to deliberately create that contrast, because ultimately hundreds of small decisions are used to guide and create clarity for the audience, helping them understand where they're supposed to be looking and when. Racking focus is an obvious example. This is even prevalent in YouTube videos. Take for example Nakey Jakey and a video where he explains his childhood growing up across from an elementary school. In this shot, if we had a heat map representing people's attention, what objects would draw their eyes? What would be the primary, secondary, and tertiary focal points? At the top would probably be Nakey Jakey himself. Eyes are often drawn to people or faces, but arguably just as many people might read the sign. I just think their eyes would linger longer on him as he speaks. And if there was a third point, it'd probably have to do with color or contrast, like the red stop sign in the background, the blue house, or the green tree. And sometimes media chooses to use these tools to sneak in details behind where we're supposed to be paying attention. There are lots of examples of this in a ton of different pieces of media that range from subtle to overt. One of my favorite aggressive instances of this comes from the hit 2009 sitcom Community. Season 2, Episode 3 of Community is titled The Psychology of Letting Go. Much like other ensemble cast sitcoms, there's A, B, C, and D plots. Tons of different characters have stuff going on. But in this episode, there's an extra hidden plotline for one of the characters, Abed, that happens in the background. He's seen talking to and getting along with a pregnant woman, arguing and running away from her aggressive partner, and eventually helping her deliver the baby. All of this happens behind primary scenes with information you're supposed to be paying attention to. It's a fun Easter egg that's neatly wrapped up with a punchline. At the end of the episode, when another character asks Abed what he's been up to, he replies, "Not much." While an aggressive example of this point, I think it's really fun. It utilizes focal points not only literally in the shots and how they're framed, but also from a plot standpoint. This information's always set behind a more important set of dialogue, things that need to be followed to keep track of the episode. Because outside of cinematography, there's also this kind of focal point for viewers when it comes to following the plotline. So what makes Abed's story work so well is that it's extra. If you miss it, you don't get lost understanding what's going on in the episode. Now, there are also more subtle versions of this that happen all the time across media. You've probably heard the term environmental storytelling when it comes to video games, but it can also be applied to tons of different forms of media. The nature of environmental storytelling requires attention and inference, for you to notice something and then extrapolate information from what's being shown without directly being told the implications. That being said, there's an obvious trade-off. In most cases, information presented through environmental storytelling needs to be non-essential, because people can and will ignore it. Part of the reason why environmental storytelling is used so often in video games is because it lends itself to audience agency. It requires the consumer to participate, letting audience members feel like detectives, piecing together clues to understand something greater. So how does this tie back to Frieren Beyond Journey's End? When I talk about Stark's story being told in the background, I don't necessarily mean literally. But we're given so much information about his character and what's going on for his arc behind what the primary focus is. And it's part of what makes Frieren feel so dense. It's incredibly efficient. Single scenes in Frieren sometimes showcase important character moments, function as a parable, tie back into major themes, build out the world, and develop the plot, doing all of these things at the same time. Well-done efficiency is often an unsung skill that greatly enhances any given piece of media. It allows people to learn way more about the story, world, and characters without it feeling arduous. I think a lot of great writers treat that information like necessary medicine for a dog, sneaking it into tasty food so it goes unnoticed. So what about Stark is so efficient? There are deep themes in Frieren about heroism. What does it mean to be a hero? How can one express heroism in both big and small actions? How can an image of a hero help those in especially dark times? Questions that are really beautifully explored in the juxtaposition of the new hero's party and the old one. Many characters in this story are heroes, but I think Stark's arc is setting up a very deep exploration of that theme. And we're given all these little hints to it, before listing off examples of soft spoiler warning for those who need it. Stark is a people's hero, very similar to the way Himmel was in the past journey. On that theme of heroism, there's a lot to be inferred about Stark and his role as a hero. At one point in the story, Stark finds out that Himmel's special sword wasn't actually pulled from the stone, it was a replica. It's this fascinating scene with tons of implication. It feels like things are very obviously being set up in the same way they were for Fern. Those two are given main character treatment constantly throughout the first season. Frieren, despite very much being the point of view protagonist, doesn't seem to be the hero in the hero's journey. This story follows the mentor's perspective, which creates this cool dynamic where they have to set up these heroes in the background. Most episodes of Frieren are prioritizing her experience and emotional journey. So why do Fern and Stark feel so fleshed out? while they are sparsely given their own moments. Stark facing his fear of the dragon in episode 6, or the fight versus Lugner and Linny. These are both examples where they're thrust into the spotlight, but there's tons of moments where they have chances to develop in the background. Stark being trained by one of the 3 elves introduced in the first season, Kraft the Monk. The way him and Fern, after tough conflict and reconciliation, connect more, his ability to face monsters more directly as the story goes on. Both Fern and Stark very easily could be the protagonist of this story, but they're not. And part of the reason for that is this is a story with a protagonist that so often is a side character, the everlasting elf, the mentor, the overpowered mage who's already saved the world once. But take a second to consider Stark's journey. A failure as a warrior in comparison to his expert brother, one forced to run away, finding and being adopted as a ward by Eisen the dwarf, the warrior of the hero's party, conflict separating them, unable to face his fears, eventually overcoming them, joining Friren's party, taking multiple leaps of faith when he has to, refusing to ever abandon innocent people, learning that the heroes he's idealized are just as flawed, revealing secrets of his past, the love his family felt for him despite his limited understanding in his childhood, learning from the many amazing people that surround him, an old dwarf and a priest who thought he was too old to adventure, growing up and adapting, but more than anything keeping up with a prodigy by his side, slowly developing feelings that start to look a lot like love for that same prodigy. Stark has an entire story that's only just started. It's a dense plot line, and all of this is happening when there's 2 to 3 other characters that seem to be getting more attention. And all of this is snuck behind his position as a supporting role. His character is utilized repeatedly for comedic relief, his strong personality a much needed balance for the 2 stoic mages that surround him. He fills that main role so well, but then his story develops before you know it. He's a fantastic character that I've repeatedly made videos about, and he's built around this principle of do what you need to do first, and then you can get away with more. And his story's far from done. All these little Easter eggs and moments will continue to serve as a foundation as they explore this character more. Stark's arc is great, and so much of it falls into the background. Information that could be ignored, but when it's pieced together by the audience, makes for a better story. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next week.